All right, so I've done a couple videos on this book, The Changing Images of Man, and yesterday I went through chapter 2 and just some information about publishers. Um, so I'm going to now quote and back talk chapter 3. Uh, so the start of chapter 3 is titled Economic Man, Servant to Industrial Metaphors. And they have a few quotes right at the beginning of the chapter. Uh, First one's from 1967, J.K. Galbraith. He said, "The imperatives of technology and organization, not the images of ideology, are what determines the shape of economic society." And he said, "I am led to the conclusion that we are the servants in thought as in action of the machines we have created to serve us." So back in 1967, he saw that as being a thing. Right? And then R.J. Forbes in 1968 said, "Technology has become the prime source of material change and so determines the pattern of the total social fabric." Now, these guys being quoted, and the book itself was written prior to the internet being public and prior to the Great Reset being published by World Economic Forum at the time leader Klaus Schwab. They say the Industrial Revolution reinforced laissez-faire economics, which is true, until communists and unions and even far-right neo-Republicans wanted to lay a crackdown. They haven't allowed a free market of free individual enterprise and people working together in community and family for decades. They defined economic man as rational, individualistic, materialistic, and mechanistic. That's what they're saying about the images that people had in the industrial technological evolution era. They say that humans could know. Well, here's some back talk against them. That humans could know what is in our interests and act accordingly is scary to people who want to control everything. Hence, huge monopolization, fitting in with communistic, fascistic, authoritarian, technocratic dictatorships, and occultist cults. The Renaissance, they say, led to the Renaissance that the authors of this book, I think, appreciate a lot more than like the printing press and individual liberties and the Reformation, where more people in these powerful societies in Europe were allowed to read the Bible in their own languages and understand it and learn from it. They liked the Renaissance more, and that led to utilitarianism, and they claimed reason as the main virtue. Yet they deny revelation as the source of truth and the source of reason, which, if properly used, guides to the truth. Thus, they kind of made the world like Apple, like a closed operating system. They thought of all the information available to human beings, it's all in the universe, which humanists mostly believe began, but they don't believe any information or director of it began the universe. They don't believe that. And they don't believe that the truth that began the universe and intellect beyond our understanding and just by reason alone has ever entered into the universe since what they call the Big Bang. In a way, this rationalism was more productive in making things, shipping, building, etc. but also more effective at dehumanizing humans while claiming to be humanists. Most anti-capitalists are atheistic. I mean, you can look at all the super far left communist regimes throughout Africa, Asia, Russia. They basically all banned religion except for the religion of the state, trusting the party and science. So they kind of nowadays want a free market, so they say, not actual freedom, but a free market basically without work, and that's why there's such a popularity and a push for the idea of AI and automation, which could make humans obsolete. They touch on what I said about industrialization, dehumanizing people by saying working for money or material gain too much and making that your identity decreases other gains like love and empathy, relationships, sharing. Though they do side with environmentalists and suggest limits on world resources are going to stop multinational corporations from having legitimate control. However, they fail to state that limits on resources are often made up by these multinational corporations so they can profit. They can profit from having the limited resources that they say are limited, and they can control their distribution. Not that there aren't limits. I mean, the earth only has so much. There are limits, just that a lot of phony value and false limits on a lot of material goods are created by multinational corporations and governments that want to control the distribution of the things that people need. Like the most needed things like food, water, clothing, shelter, transport, energy. They're not as limited, I don't think, as a lot of governments and corporations and overregulation and over-controlling them and their distribution has really said they are. They credit consumers in the book. They credit consumers, environmentalists, civil rights groups, and modern feminists with placing requirements on businesses for social responsibility, which is kind of true. They have. But has that made the world safer, wealthier, better? Has it made individuals has it decreased the amount of poverty? That's questionable. Especially a lot of false science-based environmentalism where they're just regulating so many things by a few elitist people, and then regulating the media and entertainment to distract people away from there's actually still a lot of people enslaved today, but people are focused on slavery from centuries past. As it's a distraction. They claim to care about people. There are people actually in need, and there are regulations limiting the people's needs being met. There are people starving in the world today. There are people enslaved. There are people without basic needs. And a lot of the groups that claim to be caring for those basic needs, non-profit organizations, they actually profit. They actually do. They make money, and they gain wealth. And it's sad. But people, since this book was written, have seemingly been more selfish and crazy. It seems to me. Since I was born in 85. This book was published in 82. And in my lifetime, it seems to me that there are more crazy things happening. There are more people that know less, but think they know more. Not that I'm not guilty of being one of them for over a decade of my life. I was super passionate, hardcore, self-proclaimed atheist that just thought everything was meaningless for years. They go on to say that technological change is an uncontrolled and undirected process. Yet it is very directed and controlled by the most powerful governments and then transferred to businesses like Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon, all of the different bureaus and academies of science where they claim scientific consensus and they don't allow you to question their science, which totally undermines the scientific process and expands what's called science way outside of the limits of scientific knowledge. See, in my lifetime, I believe the mother of inventions hasn't been necessity, but the illusion of deluded, corrupt powers spreading their delusion to like false needs because they feel the need to control everyone and protect themselves. The specialization of people, dwindling amount of self-reliance, education, and not too many people are like what used to be called like a jack of all trades. They can do a lot of different things, and they kind of hinted at that being a problem in the industrial technological era, but it seems that like maybe their goal is to have nobody specialized in anything except them, specialized in propagandizing and controlling people and saving the planet. So I agree, like specialization it's kind of been a problem because there are probably a lot of people that wouldn't be able to do much without the system the way it is. Like, a lot of people that depend on the system and aren't very reliant on themselves and not very reliable for other people. And I try to work on that myself. They call certain things control deficiencies. The man-made system cannot be controlled by man. Man also in system cannot control himself individually. They see it as a deficiency if they themselves can't control it. And that means they want a censorship state. They want individual choices and freedom of thought like done away with because they're deficient for the system that they want. See, but they also at least admit at the time, back in the 80s, they thought the system was too complex. And yet life is fairly simple. Making material living easier and tricking people into thinking that's all there is has actually made living less valued. It's complicated and severed us from our connection to God and each other. Collectivism, more than individualism, is to blame for this complexity and division. That's what I'm saying about it. Dependence on tech has led to separation from nature, urbanization, crowding. It's hard to live off the land, but will be impossible for most in wealthy nations if tech fails. Can astrophysicists grow plants, hunt, fish, build a fire, and cook? Can accountants, lawyers? Not that all accountants or astrophysicists couldn't do those things, but there's probably a lot of highly intellectual, very specialized people that know a lot about certain topics that depend on the system. And that's not a bad thing. We, as humans, are supposed to be dependable for each other. But the way it will go bad is when we take so much pride in our own expertise and our own intelligence that we would no longer depend on God, which we all do, even those who don't think they do. Experts, they claim human limitations made the demise of the Renaissance man necessary. So while they see specialization as a problem, they also claim that human limitations made the demise of the Renaissance man, the jack of all trades, necessary. Viewing people who know how to live as uneducated. That's it. People that know how to live their life without depending on a system as much, they consider them uneducated. which is the new norm in business and politics. This book earlier in the chapter, as throughout, makes false claims of history. They say before Enlightenment, Renaissance Europe, no civilization on earth ever focused on changing the world into what they wanted it to be. I look back at history. Study ancient civilizations, ancient empires. Alexander the Great wanted to change the world into what he wanted it to be. The Egyptians wanted to change the world into what they wanted it to be. The Romans wanted to change the world into what they wanted it to be. The Babylonians wanted to change the world into what they wanted it to be. But they claimed Christianity was the beginning of men thinking they could and should dominate and control nature. Oh, no. Sorry. They're wrong about that. Dominate and control is not the same as know the limitations of what we can do within nature and take control over what we can. Claiming the need to go post-industrial, that's basically the premise of this book, the World Economic Forum now, a lot of what the UN has to say, and a lot of government and non-government organizations have been saying. We've got to go post-industrial. We've got to evolve out of being human. We've got to evolve out of depending on nature. So they're blaming Christianity 2,000 plus years ago for starting the view of people as dominating and controlling nature. And yet, while claiming that they want to get out of that, they're the ones trying to control not just humans, but like what humans can do on the planet to save the planet. So they quote a guy named Keniston from 1965 saying, now serious visions of the future are negative visions. Yeah, well, we throw God out and the result is negative. John's Revelation, the revelation of Jesus Christ, the last book in the Bible, it was written in the 1st century AD. It was and is serious and negative for those who don't love God, which is most leaders in human history. And most of them currently. Because it's not impossible for a rich, wealthy, powerful person to be a believer in God and love God and serve God. That's not impossible. But the temptations that power brings, that the vast amount of wealth brings, means that the vast majority of people claiming to be leaders aren't followers of Jesus. Even if they say they are, they might not be. There's pretty strong evidence that a lot of them do a lot of what Jesus says not to do and don't do a lot of what he says to do in their leadership. So they say the image of humankind made up in the Industrial Revolution is impotent. Okay, yeah, impotent if it's too dependent on self-reliance, too dependent on a system, it is somewhat impotent. But if B.F. Skinner from the previous chapter, if he was correct that we got to give up our belief in free will and the ability for human individuals to make choices and act on them and live out their lives based on them, that's an idol. It's impotent. And idols are not powerful. Yet they can guide people to false, decaying ideas that lead to problems. Then we can throw out that idol and make up another, which is what this book wanted to do. And what the World Economic Forum, Big Tech, the UN, many government officials, many education professors, many educated, civilized people, they're just wanting to make idols, like make human beings an idol, make the system an idol, make government, political system an idol. And no, it's not. They're not we, on our own, aren't going to save ourselves or the planet from problems we may cause and just naturally occurring problems that were caused by the fall, by Genesis chapter 3. When Adam and Eve, the first humans, disobeyed God, were deceived by Satan, God changed the world to not be ideal in order for us to recognize our need for Him. Not for us to fix it, not for us to kick Him out further away from us so that we can fix it and make the world better than He did. Propaganda throughout industrialization led man to believe in meaningless. People believe in the meaning of life far less, with more comfort, security, or the illusion of making physical life easier. There's a lot of people very wealthy these days that aren't having to feed themselves by hard manual labor and the sweat of their own brow. To change people's minds away from this, they want to change the environment and industrialize human evolution, which I think many who believe in evolution actually know it is a myth. It's a fiction, a useful one. Like Plato said in his Republic, a noble lie that can be used, and that's what they're pushing for. So, I'm going to stop there. That's basically what chapter 3 was about, just evolving out of the industrial era, because the industrial tech era, the image of man was wrong. But they don't want to go back. They want to go forward in being wronger. So I'll do several more videos probably on the following chapters. It's kind of amazing. If it weren't so sad, it'd be funny. Trying to not be too angry or disturbed or mad about it. It is sad. It's sad that the people running this world, for the most part, or trying to dominate and control it, thinking so highly of themselves as so intelligent, and denying their own imperfections, their own corruptions, their own problems, but just thinking they can solve everyone else's and demand it. And I don't want that. I don't think anybody should want that. Because a lot of what I used to want when I thought I was really smart after getting out of the Army and going to college, what I wanted wasn't good for me. I just wanted to have fun, drink, and party, and I think there's a lot of people in the world that, like, part of growing and maturing is learning that, oh yeah, what I wanted hasn't always been good for me. And seemingly the authors of publishers of this book and many of the people they quote throughout it want what they want, and they want it now, and they want everybody else to want it, and they want to, like, trick people into wanting it and call the people that don't want it stupid. Hope that changes, and maybe my part in changing it is just speaking words about it. Hope they help